Welcome to the Adaptive Management Plan for Recreational Cycling in Sherman Branch Nature Preserve, North Carolina. This plan has been developed for the purpose of striking a balance between maintaining and advancing mountain bike trails and riding opportunities, and maintaining and protecting the local environment and ecosystems from potential detrimental effects of cycling. And in case you needed a reminder of the importance of mountain biking, the CDC has shown that recreational mountain biking is directly linked to a variety of health improvements, such as lower stress and increased muscular strength, either through the athletics themselves or by simply taking in the natural aesthetics. These maps serve to illustrate the prevalence of mountain bike trail systems in the Charlotte area. With many parks to choose from, mountain biking is quickly becoming a primary attraction for visitors and residents of the city. As previously stated, Sherman Branch is located in eastern Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a 210-acre nature preserve which, while it doesn't have ponds, playgrounds, baseball fields, or nature centers, what it does have is an 11.2-mile trail system that is ranked number 6 in North Carolina and number 33 in the world according to singletracks.com. Historic background. Prior to 2007, Sherman Branch was considered a, quote, secret mountain biking trail, developed and maintained by the Tar Heel Trailblazer Mountain Bike Club. In 2008, Mecklenburg County completed a study of its 46 undeveloped land-banked properties in an attempt to document natural resources and provide recommendations for future nature preserve designations. In 2015, Sherman Branch earned their nature preserve status. Now, before getting into the actual resources that this plan seeks to manage, I'd like to quickly discuss the theory of recreational carrying capacity, which is the level of recreational use an area can withstand while still providing a sustained quality of recreation. There are physical, ecological, social, and facility facets of this theory. Where physical is the amount of space available, this is an interesting aspect of single-track trail management because the trail itself might only be about 6 inches wide, and in a dense forest can almost overlap mere feet from another part of the trail without the rider ever noticing. Ecological or biological is the ability of the forest to withstand use without unacceptable damage to local flora, fauna, soil, and water quality. Facility are the additions to the environment to support visitor needs, and for biking, these can range from parking lots to the building of bridges, rock gardens, berms, and dragon tails. And finally, the social capacity is the number of visitors that provide an optimum recreational experience. Simmons explains this by using the example of a hiker who might define the running into of 3 other hikers as unacceptable, because their primary motive for hiking is to be alone in the wilderness. While one might think we'd focus more on the ecological capacity when dealing with environmental management, in fact, all of these facets are important to keep in mind when attempting to manage the following resources. Now, I'd like to pause for a second and talk about social capacity, particularly in the time of COVID. Many trail systems have found that turning their trails into single-direction loops accomplishes several things. Number 1, it increases social capacity by decreasing the number of riders one would run into going the opposite direction, which on these very narrow trails can severely slow down a ride. 2, if a rider isn't running into other bikers, it results in a desired feeling of being alone in nature. And 3, particularly in the time of COVID, single-direction trail systems achieve the necessary social distancing needed to keep riders healthy and prevents unnecessary close passing. Now, one downside to single-direction trails is the lack of variety that a lot of riders crave. This problem can be resolved by switching the direction of the trails every 6 months. Now that we've covered social capacity, let's dive into the resources we are attempting to manage. Soil. The primary culprit here is erosion due to bicycle tires. Studies show that bikers typically attribute more soil destruction to motorized vehicles, and in turn underestimate the amount of damage a bicycle can do. Quinn deems that the primary erosion prevention method should be the prohibition of riding within 24 hours of rain. This allows the trail to stay dry and prevents inadvertent widening, which is when bikers veer off to the side of the trail over and over again to stay out of the mud or standing water, and this can cause damage to vegetation, which we'll touch on in a bit. Other erosion prevention methods are the building of water bars, which look like speed bumps in the middle of the woods, but serve to channel water off the trails, berming corners, which are banks similar to a racetrack and they keep the centripetal force of the tire underneath it rather than allowing the tires to slide. And finally, the building of rock gardens and dragonbacks, seen in the pictures below, that actually prevent the tires from coming into contact with the trail at all. Vegetation. Impact on vegetation when discussing mountain biking is typically minimal due to the typical 6 to 12 inch single tracks. In fact, studies have shown that the majority of impact takes place within the first 2 weeks of trail creation. This makes management fairly simple, but highlights the importance of avoiding trail widening and the need for riders to stick to the prescribed trail. One more seemingly counterproductive method of protecting vegetation are the use of prescribed controlled burns. Now, it's understandable that the idea of burning the forest in order to save it is a little bit of an oxymoron. However, it's important to look at the actual results of the burns on the vegetation itself. First of all, it spurs on the growth of wildflowers, thins the woods, which results in overall beautification, but more importantly, it reduces hazardous fuels, which can prevent large and destructive forest fires. And on a site's recreational value, it essentially results in more mountain bike trips on average, and an increased value on each of those trips. Wildlife. While there are several animal species in the area like deer and squirrel, one of note is the American woodcock, which makes its home in a small area of the preserve. While the protection of its nesting habitat is paramount, this can also be accomplished by riders staying on the trail and adhering to a general mountain biking code of conduct, which I will discuss in a second. Volunteerism and community outreach. While volunteerism is important in the maintenance of trails, the Tar Heel Trailblazer Mountain Bike Club has successfully managed this trail system since its inception in 2006. This leaves our primary method of ensuring that bikers only ride on dry, official trails, don't litter, and don't meddle with local wildlife is to promote the following of a fairly universal mountain biking code of conduct, seen below. While many non-biker trail users perceive mountain bikers as not having concern for the environment, Simmons shows us that bikers and their clubs do stress substantial concern for the environment, accept the need for acceptable limits on their activities, and actually organize much of their lives around environmental issues. In light of this, it's reasonable to believe that reaching out to clubs and posting this code of conduct and expectations at trailheads will succeed in reminding riders of their obligation to the environment. Here are my resources, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to listen and consider how an adaptive management plan can strike a balance between minimizing environmental damage and allowing for thousands of riders to enjoy their favorite pastime. Thank you.